The mining world of Gosa Quintus maintained exemplary tithe records for generations. Its adamantium exports exceeded quota by a fifth, consistently praised by both the Adeptus Munitorum and Adeptus Mechanicus. The noble Trist dynasty governed this Delver world with what appeared to be flawless efficiency, transforming the planetoid into a model of industrial productivity. None suspected that beneath the surface of this imperial success story, something fundamentally wrong had taken root. For centuries, the Trist dynasty harboured a terrible secret that would eventually force the Imperium to confront the true scope of Genestealer infiltration throughout the galaxy. The infection began approximately 1500 years before the events of 680.41, when fragments from the Space Hulk designated Curse of Unreason crashed onto Gosa Quintus. Hidden within that corrupted debris travelled at least one pure strain Genestealer, a vanguard organism of the Tyrannid species designed specifically for infiltration and subversion. This single creature represented a threat that Imperial authorities would not fully comprehend for over a millennium. The Genestealer disappeared into the massive mining complex known as the Great Pit, where kilometres of tunnels and abandoned workings provided perfect concealment for what would follow. Genestealer infection operates through a reproductive cycle that differs fundamentally from conventional biological warfare. When a pure strain Genestealer implants its genetic material into a human host, the victim survives the encounter outwardly unchanged. The infected individual returns to normal life, experiencing only an overwhelming compulsion to mate and reproduce. This infected host, termed contagy, may display subtle physical changes such as a slight blue or mauve pallor to the skin, but nothing that would immediately raise suspicion among Imperial citizens accustomed to harsh industrial conditions. The psychological transformation proves far more profound than any physical alteration. The victim falls under complete psychic control through a phenomenon the Genestealers call the brood mind. The brood mind represents a Gestalt psychic consciousness that links all members of a Genestealer cult to their patriarch. This connection does not simply dominate the will of infected individuals, it fundamentally rewrites their perception of reality. When contagy produce offspring, those children emerge as grotesque hybrids bearing obvious Xenos characteristics. First-generation hybrids closely resemble their pure strain Genestealer progenitor, possessing multiple limbs ending in claws, bulbous craniums, needle-toothed maws, and mottled purple skin. These creatures should horrify any human parent. Instead, the brood mind ensures that infected parents perceive their monstrous offspring as beautiful and precious. This cognitive manipulation allows the cult to expand within a population without triggering the revulsion that would normally prompt reports to Imperial authorities. The generational cycle progresses with calculated biological precision. First-generation hybrids mate with newly infected contagy, producing second-generation offspring that display fewer mutations while retaining significant alien features. These hybrids can pass for human at distance or in poor lighting, though close examination would reveal their true nature. Third-generation hybrids stand upright and could potentially blend into crowds if wearing concealing clothing. By the fourth generation, offspring appear almost entirely human save for hairless bodies and unusually intense eyes. These neophyte hybrids can walk freely through Imperial society, infiltrating positions of authority and trust without detection. The cycle completes itself through a biological paradox that ensures perpetual expansion of the infection. Fourth-generation hybrids produce pure strain Genestealers as their offspring. These fifth-generation creatures carry an identical genome to the original Genestealer that began the infection, allowing the cycle to begin anew on virgin populations. This reproductive strategy enables exponential growth while maintaining genetic consistency across generations. A single Genestealer successfully reaching a populated world can theoretically doom an entire sector given sufficient time to complete multiple generational cycles. On Gosa Quintus, the original Genestealer grew into a massive patriarch as the cult expanded around it. This transformation occurs naturally as the psychic network of the brood mind strengthens with each new infection. The patriarch becomes twice the height of a space marine, possessed of strength sufficient to tear through armoured vehicles. Its psychic abilities grow proportionally with cult size, eventually capable of dominating thousands of minds simultaneously across vast distances. The patriarch at Gosa Quintus achieved this apex predator status over centuries of careful expansion, slowly converting the ruling Trist dynasty, while using their authority to shield the growing cult from outside scrutiny. The cult developed sophisticated organizational structures that exploited the bureaucratic complexity of imperial governance. Fourth-generation hybrids, sufficiently human in appearance to avoid detection, assumed leadership roles throughout Gosar Quinta society. The Mega served as primary propagandist and diplomat, using supernatural charisma and psychic abilities to convert new members and suborn planetary officials. The Primus functioned as military commander, organizing the cult's armed forces while planning for eventual uprising. Other specialists emerged as needed. The cult maintained the appearance of orthodox imperial worship while subtly incorporating Xenos elements into their theology. They spoke of the four-armed emperor and prophesied the coming of star children from beyond the void. To outsiders, this appeared as mere theological variation within acceptable imperial parameters. The Triss dynasty's control of Gosar Quintus provided the cult with resources far beyond those available to most Xenos infiltrators. Under the guise of legitimate industrial operations, infected members of the dynasty spread to other worlds throughout the Saradon sector and beyond. Mining operations required constant exchange of personnel and equipment between worlds. Cargo vessels moving adamantium ore to Forge worlds carried hidden passengers in their holds. Workers transferred between facilities unknowingly spread the infection to new populations. The cult exploited every legitimate channel of imperial commerce to extend its reach across dozens of systems. Each new world infected became another node in an expanding network of corruption that operated entirely within the framework of legal imperial activity. In 680 41, Inquisitor Chagrin of the Ordo Xenos began investigating reports of religious deviance on Gosar Quintus. The decorated Inquisitor led a team of Militarum Tempestus scions into the depths of the Great Pit, seeking evidence of heresy among the mining clans. What Chagrin discovered in those subterranean depths remains partially unknown, as his final communique to the Inquisition stated simply that all was well, and the Triss dynasty should be left to its own devices. The trusted and respected Inquisitor then fell silent. It took a full Terran year before Chagrin's fellows in the Holy Ordos noticed something deeply wrong. The style of that final message did not match Chagrin's normal communication patterns. The content seemed designed to deflect further investigation, rather than provide genuine assessment. The Death Watch dispatched Kill Team X's, 5 Space Marines tasked with determining Chagrin's fate and investigating potential Xenos presence. These warriors vanished into the Great Pit just as completely as the Inquisitor and his scions. They encountered ambush in the initial phases of their investigation, overwhelmed by sheer numbers of hybrid cultists before they could report their findings. The loss of an entire Death Watch kill team without any communication triggered more serious response protocols. Chaplain Orton Cassius of the Ultramarines chapter, seconded to the Death Watch, personally assembled a hand-picked kill team to investigate Gosar Quintus without waiting for formal authorization from his watch commander. Cassius had fought Genestealers before during his service with the Ultramarines, though always as individual organisms or small broods aboard space hulks. He possessed no frame of reference for what awaited in the Great Pit. The kill team descended through kilometers of mining tunnels, encountering increasing evidence of Xenos' presence. They discovered that the mining clans were not sun-starved human laborers, but grotesque hybrids of human and tyrannid genetic material. First and second generation hybrids served as shock troops, their mutations too obvious for surface operations but perfectly suited for tunnel fighting. Third and fourth generation hybrids provided tactical coordination and ranged fire support, their near-human appearance allowing them to impersonate Imperial forces when necessary. The deeper Cassius and his warriors fought, the more horrific the situation became. Hundreds of cultists died in the fighting, yet thousands more emerged from the interconnected warren of the Great Pit. The scale of the infestation dwarfed any previous Genestealer encounter in Imperial records. Kill Team Cassius eventually reached the deepest chambers where the Patriarch itself waited, surrounded by pure-strain Genestealers and hybrid honor guards. The chaplain confronted the massive Xenos creature in direct combat, his Rosarius energy field barely protecting him from claws that had torn through ceramite power armor. Through faith and fury, Cassius managed to slay the Patriarch, severing the psychic link that bound the cult together and sending surviving hybrids into confusion. The kill team recovered Inquisitor Chagrin's servo skull among the cult's trophies. The skull's memory core contained evidence that proved vastly more disturbing than the Patriarch itself. Shipping manifests documented the movement of infected personnel across the sector. Communications logs revealed coordination between gene sects on multiple worlds. Financial records showed the Trist dynasty had established mining operations on dozens of planets, each following the same pattern of exceeding production quotas while maintaining perfect compliance with imperial bureaucracy. The implications were staggering. Gosar Quintus did not represent an isolated Xenos infestation. It functioned as the core of a vast infiltration network that spread across half the sector and potentially far beyond. Cassius and his surviving warriors emerged from the Great Pit changed by what they had witnessed. The chaplain understood that Genestealer cults represented an entirely new category of threat to the Imperium. These were not simple predators or raiders, but sophisticated infiltrators, capable of corrupting entire planetary societies from within over multiple generations. The discovery of Gosar Quintus marked the first time Imperial authorities properly documented the full scope of Genestealer reproductive cycles and their purpose as vanguard organisms for Tyranid hive fleets. Only when the First Tyrannic War began several decades later with the arrival of Hive Fleet Behemoth did the full horror become clear. Genestealer infestations served as beacons, drawing the Tyranids toward worlds already compromised and weakened by internal corruption. The Gosar Quintus investigation fundamentally altered Imperial understanding of the Tyranid threat. Orton Cassius became obsessed with hunting Genestealer cults, working closely with the Death Watch and Ordo Xenos to root out dozens of infestations in the years that followed. Yet for every cult discovered and purged, more remained hidden in the dark spaces of the Imperium. The efficiency with which the Trist dynasty had spread its curse across the Aradon sector demonstrated how easily Genestealer infiltration could exploit the Imperium's own infrastructure against itself. Trade routes, mining operations, pilgrim vessels, and military transfers all provided vectors for spreading the infection between worlds. The pattern observed on Gosar Quintus repeated itself across the galaxy wherever Genestealer cults took root. On the hive world of Icarth IV, a pseudo-religious movement called the Brotherhood grew in power, despite attempts by the ecclesiarchy and planetary governor to suppress it. The cult began in factory slums, preaching that the Emperor would soon return in physical form and promising better conditions for the oppressed industrial workforce. This message found fertile ground among populations ground down by brutal working conditions and indifferent authorities. The Brotherhood grew for years, carefully expanding its membership while maintaining the facade of legitimate if heterodox imperial worship. The Brotherhood eventually seized control of Ishar IV through carefully coordinated uprising that caught Imperial defenders completely off guard. Inquisitor Agmar of the Ordo Xenos investigated the rebellion, quickly determining that it masked Xenos infiltration rather than simple heresy. The Inquisitor petitioned Chapter Master Marnus Calgar of the Ultramarines for assistance. Calgar arrived 39 days later aboard the battle barge Octavius with a force of Space Marines. The combined might of the Ultramarines, Planetary Defense Forces, Astra Militarum, and Adeptus Arbits eventually suppressed the uprising and purged the planet of visible Genestealer presence. The cleansing of Ishar IV appeared complete. Inquisitor Agmar methodically hunted down Genestealers, hybrids, infected humans, cult members, and traitors across the planet. Imperial forces discovered the Patriarch in crypts beneath a prominent cult gathering site. An Ultramarines librarian eventually slew the bloated creature in psychically charged combat, seemingly ending the threat. Yet astropaths on Ishar IV reported disturbing developments. The oldest psychers sensed the Patriarch's psychic call radiating outward into the void before its death. They felt something vast and shadowy turn its attention toward the world in response to that beacon. In 992 Pont M41, as Hive Fleet Kraken approached Ishar IV after devouring hundreds of planets, thousands of Genestealers burst from beneath the surface. The supposedly complete purge had missed significant numbers of cultists who had gone into deep hiding after the uprising's failure. These survivors emerged to aid the Tyranid invasion, sabotaging defense systems and attacking Imperial forces from within, while the Hive Fleet assaulted from orbit. The Brotherhood demonstrated that even after apparent eradication, Genestealer cults could survive and resurface when their true masters arrived. Marneus Calgar returned to Ishar IV to face the Tyranid threat, bringing tactics developed during the First Tyrannic War at Macragge. The Ultramarines inflicted massive casualties on Hive Fleet Kraken in both space and ground engagements. The fighting lasted nearly a full Terran year, with Space Marine tyrannic war veterans scouring the Hive cities in brutal close-quarters battles. The Imperium eventually held Ichath, but nearly 1 billion lives were lost in the process. The world that had seemed secure became a charnel house, specifically because Genestealer infiltration had undermined defences from within before the main Tyranid assault began. The pattern repeated across the galaxy as more Hive fleets approached. In 997 M41, reports emerged of a new Tyranid threat designated Hive Fleet Leviathan. Unlike Behemoth and Kraken, which approached from single vectors, Leviathan entered the galaxy from a dozen directions simultaneously. In the space of a single Terran month, hundreds of Genestealer cults revealed themselves across the Segmentum Solar. The Deathwatch found itself spread too thin to halt these coordinated uprisings. The cults had been growing in secret for generations, positioning themselves to strike at precisely the moment when Leviathan's approach made Imperial response most difficult. The slum world of Chance's Vale represents a different path to damnation than the covert infection that consumed Gosar Quintus. The planet's population clustered in sprawling shantytowns along its coasts, mining salt from seas with dangerously high saline content. The work desiccated their skin, leaving the population with wrinkled, pale flesh that marked them as labourers even from a distance. Poverty defined existence on Chance's Vale. The deprivation became so absolute that when a new religious movement emerged in the principal spaceport of Senfar, thousands joined not through psychic compulsion, but through desperate hope. The source of this movement remained hidden initially. A pure-strain Genestealer made its lair aboard the superbarge Just Strength docked at Senfar. From this concealed position, it infected key individuals who then spread throughout the desperate population. But the cult that emerged differed from typical Genestealer infiltration. The sheer hopelessness of life on Chance's Vale meant that many joined the cult voluntarily, attracted by promises of escape and new beginnings among the stars. They were not infected with the Genestealer's kiss. They simply believed the message that Magus Maravich Tendark preached with such fervent conviction. Tendark became the cult's first and most talented demagogue. Every Emperor's Day, the Magus delivered sermons to rapturous crowds, speaking about coming glories and divine beings called the Star Children, who would lift the faithful away from their misery. He referenced a star saviour who would lead them to promised salvation. Thousands fell under Tendark's sway within weeks. The cult that formed around these teachings combined elements of imperial worship with Xenos doctrine so seamlessly that outsiders struggled to identify where orthodoxy ended and heresy began. To the desperate population of Chance's Vale, the Pauper Princes offered what the Imperium never had: genuine hope. The cult eventually infiltrated the superbarge Just Strength completely, using it to spread their message across multiple star systems. Tendark personally led missionary efforts, establishing gene sects on world after world. The cult's expansion followed trade routes and transport vessels, quietly building networks that would eventually span over 15 planets, with membership numbering in the billions. The Pauper Princes became one of 6 major Genestealer cults, documented by the Ordo Xenos as posing sector-level threats to imperial stability. Tendark achieved martyrdom, saving the cult's patriarch from assassination. A rattling sniper, possibly working for imperial authorities, who had begun investigating the cult's activities, took aim at the Star Saviour during a public gathering. The Magus threw himself in front of the patriarch, taking the bullet that would have killed the massive Genestealer. Tendark died instantly. The rattling assassin was torn apart within the hour by enraged cultists, but Tendark's sacrifice transformed him into something far more powerful than he had been in life. The cult proclaimed him a saint. His death caused the cult's membership to quadruple overnight as thousands more joined, inspired by this ultimate act of devotion. Since that moment, the Pauper Princes have maintained fierce hatred for rattling specifically, and the Astra Militarum in general. The cult preserved Tendark's corpse, carrying his mummified remains into battle as a sacred relic. His skull still bears the hole from the sniper's bullet that killed him. Before combat, cult members insert fingers or talons into the empty eye sockets, believing this grants them a portion of the dead Magus's uncanny vision. The reliquary of Saint Tendark became the cult's most treasured artifact, symbolizing their core belief that greatness comes only through self-sacrifice and humility. The Pauper Princes embodied the Broodmind's control in its most extreme form. Ordocinus files document 100 incidents of shocking self-sacrifice, including cultists charging orc bone breakers to jam their gears with their own bodies and forming human walls to absorb enemy fire while protecting their leaders. One clutch of Genestealers dispatched from Chance's Vale reached the Sentinel world of Vigilus in 210.33 Pevio, under the new Imperial dating system. Only a single Genestealer from that clutch survived the journey, but one proved sufficient. The creature secreted itself in caverns beneath the continent of Mega Borealis, beginning the infection cycle that would threaten one of the Imperium's most strategically vital worlds. Over ensuing centuries, that single Genestealer grew into a patriarch known as Grandsire Worm. The cult expanded with patient deliberation, carefully infiltrating every level of Vigilus society. Vigilus occupied a position of supreme strategic importance after the opening of the Great Rift. The Cicatrix Maledictum split the galaxy, cutting Imperium Nihilus off from the Imperium Sanctus. Vigilus stood guard over one of the few stable channels through the Great Rift, the Nachmund Gauntlet. Were Vigilus to fall, worlds on the far side of the Great Rift would be completely isolated from reinforcement and resupply. The planet consisted of massive hive cities and colossal forges separated by Dust Bowl wastelands, with heavily fortified reservoirs protecting scarce water supplies. Bastion-class force fields protected each major population centre. The Pauper Princes on Vigilus established multiple gene sects across the planet's hive sprawls. The Devoted Sons, the Writhing Worm, and the Claw of the Thirsting Worm each developed in different regions, all ultimately loyal to Grandsire Worm through the Brood Mind. The Claw of the Thirsting Worm thrived in subterranean depths below the militarized reservoir called Gragan Hollow. Many of their number never saw the sky before their eventual uprising. The cult's infiltration reached the highest echelons of Vigilus society. Wheels within wheels and plans within plans saw the cult's creed infect even the Adeptus Ministorum of Saints Haven and the planet's ruling Aquilarian Council. The Pauper Princes intended their day of ascension to occur several months later than it ultimately did. They had timed their uprising to coincide with maximum cult strength and minimum Imperial defensive capability. But the opening of the Great Rift unleashed consequences the cult could not have anticipated. Massive orc forces emerged from the phenomenon some greenskins called Gork's Grin, crash-landing across Vigilus in numbers that immediately threatened all major population centres. The orcs turned the wastelands into brutal battlegrounds. Only the Bastion-class force fields kept the hive cities safe from immediate overrun. The cult leadership faced an impossible decision. Years of careful infiltration and preparation risked complete destruction if the orcs conquered Vigilus before the cult could act. Grandsire Worm coordinated with GeneSect leaders across the planet and they made their choice. The Pauper Princes would launch their uprising early, refusing to see decades of work wasted by reckless greenskins. The decision demonstrated the sophisticated strategic thinking that fourth-generation hybrid leaders could achieve. They understood the risk of premature action, but judged it preferable to losing everything to Xenos they considered inferior. The uprising began with synchronized ambushes across every hive sprawl simultaneously. In Dirkden Hive Sprawl, the Pauper Prince's primary base of power, cultists already outnumbered loyal Imperial citizens. They had little difficulty establishing control once open conflict began. Subverted PDF regiments turned their weapons on loyal units. Officers under cult control issued orders that sent Imperial forces into carefully prepared kill zones. The response from Vigilus's Imperial government came slowly, hampered by confusion about the scale and coordination of the attacks. Many authorities initially dismissed the violence as mere criminal activity rather than coordinated insurrection. In Dirkden, cult leaders executed one of the war's most cynical betrayals. Using pet officers and corrupted guardsmen, they manipulated 4,000 Imperial soldiers into marching into the wastelands to face approximately 15,000 orcs. The cultist officers assured these doomed troops that they would be withdrawn once Dirkden's force fields came back online after supposed maintenance. The soldiers trusted their commanders and followed orders, moving into defensive positions in the open wastes. Simultaneously, cultists staged an uprising within Dirkden's primary hive. With Imperial forces already engaged outside and the command structure compromised, the defenseless government fell quickly. The cultists then raised the force fields suddenly, trapping the 4,000 guardsmen outside to meet their deaths at orc hands, while being unable to retreat to safety. Many untainted citizens fled Dirkden as it fell to cult control. They sought refuge in neighbouring hive sprawls, not realising they carried hidden Genestealer cultists with them. These infiltrators immediately began establishing footholds in their new locations, spreading the infection further even as the Imperium attempted to contain the initial uprising. At Otek hive sprawl, the Pauper Princes struck hard, seeking control of the settlement's plentiful water supplies. Despite bitter fighting, the cult seized Otek's water distribution systems and corrupted them with genetic taint, ensuring that anyone who drank from the contaminated supply risked infection. The scale of the infiltration became apparent as fighting spread. Megaborealis came under heavy assault from Pauper Prince's forces, with the Omniscient hoist water delivery relay falling into cult hands. Multiple hive sprawls faced simultaneous attacks from cultists, orcs, and in some cases chaos forces that had followed Abaddon's Black Crusade through the Great Rift. The Imperial defenders struggled to identify friend from foe when PDF units turned traitor mid-battle, and supposed loyal citizens revealed themselves as hybrid cultists. The coordination demonstrated by Grandsire Worm proved that Genestealer patriarchs could direct operations across an entire planet, with precision that rivaled or exceeded human command structures. Chapter Master Madnius Kalga of the Ultramarines eventually responded to Vigilus's plight, leading multiple Space Marine chapters in a massive intervention. But even with Space Marine support, Kalga was forced to make brutal strategic decisions. He abandoned Hive Dirkden entirely to Genestealer control, judging it too compromised to reclaim without resources he could not spare. The battle for Vigilus continued for months, with the Pauper Princes proving nearly impossible to fully eradicate despite heavy losses. Imperial propaganda proclaimed Kalga victorious, but the reality remained more complex. The cult had been contained but not destroyed, and elements had already spread to Vigilus's moon and other worlds in the system. Perhaps most shocking was the discovery in M42 that the Pauper Princes had established a presence on Holy Terror itself. The infection came to light through pure chance during a gang war in the depths of Arcology Vericitum Neglis, in Terra's northern polar region. A stim deal gone wrong triggered violent conflict between rival gangs. When local Arbite's forces responded, both criminal groups retreated into long-abandoned mag transit tunnels beneath the Arcology. There they encountered something neither expected. Genestealer cultists poured from subterranean holds, slaughtering the intruders indiscriminately. A single Arbite squad managed to escape aboard a repressor transport, staying alive long enough to transmit word of their discovery before being surrounded and killed. That transmission reached the Inquisition's Ordo Xenos. Lord Inquisitor Ichabel Vasmir mobilized immediately, understanding the catastrophic implications. A Genestealer cult active beneath the Imperial Palace represented a threat beyond normal comprehension. If the heart of the Imperium itself had been compromised, no world could be considered safe. The investigation revealed 3 separate Genestealer cults operating on Terra simultaneously: the Pauper Princes under Patriarch Begeter, the Worms of the Urtendril, and the Shadowed. All 3 had barely begun their infiltration, their uprising still years away according to typical cult timelines. The early discovery represented extraordinary fortune for the Imperium. The Adeptus Custodes under Blade Champion Aristothes Carvellan took personal command of the hunt. The Wyvern's Gate spaceport was closed, trapping billions of pilgrims, traders and workers in holding patterns that might last years. But this disruption seemed minor compared to the alternative of allowing Genestealer infection to spread unchecked through Terra's population. Imperial hunting parties penetrated deep into the Pauper Prince's territory beneath the Arcology. The cult prepared for the assault they knew was coming, though their position was desperately weak. Their infiltration remained in the early stages, their numbers insufficient for meaningful resistance against the talons of the Emperor. Patriarch Begeter faced additional challenges beyond simple military disadvantage. Some nebulous psychic force worked against its will, dulling its abilities in ways the creature could not comprehend. Speculation suggested the Emperor's psychic presence on Terra itself might interfere with the Broodmind connection, though this remained unconfirmed. Carvellan led his custodes deep into the tunnels, accompanied by Alarus custodians and Sisters of Silence. They ignored the lowest cultist rabble, focusing exclusively on reaching and eliminating the Patriarch. Waves of neophyte cultists died trying to slow the custodes' advance. The Reductus Saboteur Messiah Thrake waited in ambush, detonating explosive charges that created a devastating avalanche in the confined tunnels. Several custodes fell to the trap, but Carvalan and his core warriors pressed forward. The ultimate fate of Patriarch Begeta and the full resolution of the unthinkable war remains incompletely documented. But the fact that Terra did not fall suggests the custodes succeeded in their mission. The discovery on Terra demonstrated that no world, regardless of supposed sanctity or security, remained immune to Genestealer infiltration. If the cult could establish itself beneath the Imperial Palace, it could establish itself anywhere. The implications forced a fundamental reassessment of the Tyranid threat. Genestealer cults were not simply advance forces that prepared worlds for consumption. They represented an existential threat to the Imperium's ability to maintain cohesion across its vast territory. Every trade vessel, every pilgrim ship, every military transport became a potential vector for spreading the infection between worlds. The ultimate betrayal awaited every Genestealer cult that successfully completed its mission. When a cult achieved full control of a world, when the Day of Ascension reached its triumphant conclusion, the Patriarch's psychic beacon blazed brighter than ever before. That signal reached across the void, drawing the attention of the Tyranid hive mind. The cultists believed they were calling their gods to witness their victory and lift them to salvation among the stars. What actually approached was something vastly different and infinitely more terrible. When a Tyranid hive fleet arrives at a world controlled by Genestealer cultists, the Patriarch's connection to the broodmind severs instantly. The hive mind subsumes the Patriarch into its greater consciousness, reducing the once mighty creature to merely another organism in the swarm. In that awful moment, every cult member experiences terrible clarity. The psychic connection that had bound them together, that had made them see their hybrid children as beautiful, that had convinced them they served benevolent gods, suddenly vanishes. They see themselves as they truly are. They see their monstrous offspring for what they truly are, and they see the Tyranids descending from orbit not as saviors, but as devourers. The cultists realize too late that the star children they worshipped view all flesh the same way. To the Tyranids, cultist and non-cultist alike are simply biomass to be harvested and consumed. The faithful who sacrificed everything, who betrayed their own species, who murdered their friends and family in service to the coming gods, discover that their devotion means nothing. The Tyranids fall upon them with the same voracious hunger they show toward any other prey. Those cultists who survive the initial shock sometimes attempt to fight back, but by then the world's defences have been systematically dismantled by the cult's own actions. The planetary defence forces have been sabotaged or destroyed. The Space Marine chapters that might have intervened have been drawn away by false reports or eliminated by cult assassins. The void shields and orbital platforms have been deactivated or corrupted. The world that the cult spent generations preparing for ascension becomes the perfect feeding ground for the hive fleet. The population has already been gathered into dense urban centres. The military resistance has been neutralised. Internal conflict has weakened any remaining defenders. The Tyranids consume the planet with efficiency that would have been impossible had Imperial defences remained intact. Within weeks or months, the world transforms into a barren rock, stripped of every scrap of biological material. The cultists die alongside everyone they betrayed, their bodies dissolved in digestion pools and their genetic material absorbed into new Tyranid organisms. This pattern has repeated across hundreds of worlds throughout Imperial history. The Brotherhood on Ishar IV, the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor across the Charadon sector, the Pauper Princes on dozens of worlds. Each cult believes itself unique, specially chosen, destined for glorious transformation. Each cult follows the same path to the same inevitable conclusion. The Genestealer reproductive cycle represents biological warfare of unprecedented sophistication. It turns the victim population against itself, using their own social structures, their own infrastructure, their own desperation and faith to prepare worlds for consumption. The Imperium has developed no effective counter to this threat. Individual cults can be hunted down and purged once discovered, as Orton Cassius demonstrated on Gosar Quintus and Marneus Calgar proved on Icar IV. But for every cult discovered, dozens more remain hidden in the dark spaces between stars. The bureaucratic complexity that allows the Imperium to govern 1 million worlds also provides countless opportunities for corruption to spread unnoticed. The very systems designed to maintain Imperial control become vectors for Xenos infiltration. The Death Watch and Ordo Xenos remain constantly vigilant, hunting for the subtle signs of cult activity, unexplained increases in religious fervour, unusual demographic changes in isolated communities, mining operations that exceed quotas by suspicious margins, shipping manifests that do not quite match physical cargo inventories. But these investigations require resources the Imperium increasingly lacks. The opening of the Great Rift, the arrival of multiple Tyranid hive fleets, the rise of Chaos forces under Abaddon's Black Crusade all compete for attention and military response. The careful detective work required to identify Genestealer cults in their early stages gets neglected in favour of responding to more immediate threats. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle of vulnerability. The Imperium's resources get stretched thinner across more fronts. This allows cults more time to establish themselves before discovery. By the time they are discovered, they have grown too large to eliminate without massive military intervention. That intervention draws resources away from other threats, allowing new cults to establish themselves elsewhere. The Genestealer infiltration strategy exploits the fundamental weakness in Imperial governance, the impossibility of maintaining perfect security across 1 million worlds simultaneously. The scope of infiltration revealed on Gosa Quintus suggested that entire sectors might be compromised without Imperial authorities realizing the full extent of the corruption. The Trist dynasty's shipping records indicated infection had spread far beyond even what Kill Team Cassius discovered. Similar patterns likely exist elsewhere, with established cults using legitimate Imperial commerce to spread the infection across dozens or hundreds of worlds before anyone realizes what has occurred. The patient nature of Genestealer reproduction, with cults sometimes waiting centuries before attempting their final uprising, means that some infections might date back millennia. The tragic irony is that the cultists themselves remain largely innocent victims of circumstance. The broodmind's psychic control means they genuinely believe they serve righteous causes. They see themselves as liberators freeing oppressed populations from imperial tyranny. They believe they're bringing salvation to worlds drowning in despair. The cognitive manipulation is so complete that even when presented with evidence of their true nature, many cultists cannot accept it. Their minds literally cannot process information that contradicts what the broodmind shows them. Only in that final moment when the hive mind arrives and the broodmind connection severs do they achieve terrible clarity. And by then, it is far too late for redemption or escape. They die as they lived, tools of the Tyranid species serving purposes they never truly understood. The Genestealer curse transforms its victims so thoroughly that they willingly, even eagerly, participate in their own species' destruction. This represents perhaps the most insidious threat the Imperium faces. Not an enemy that attacks from without, but a corruption that grows from within, using humanity's own hopes and dreams as weapons against itself.